This is Mr. Beck Does Your Homework. This is AP Physics, Homework 7.2, questions 13 and 14. It says an object weighing 297 newtons in air, and let me just draw that. Here's my spring scale, and I know that whatever this object is, it has a weight of 297 newtons when it's in air. Okay, it's immersed in water after being tied to a string connected to a balance. So there you go. The scale now reads 261 newtons. So when it's in the water, what I've got is I've got this thing and it's submerged in the water, and now the scale reads 261 newtons. Immersed in oil, the object appears to weigh 274, so this is water. And finally, I'm going to have this thing, and I'm going to have the scale, and I'm going to have my object, and it's going to be in oil this time. When it's in oil, it reads 274. Okay? Find the density of the object. Well, I know that my density of my object is going to be the mass of the object divided by the volume of the object. I can find the mass of the object reasonably easy because, let me compare these two. I've got 297 newtons here, I've got 261 newtons here. So what I know from this one is I have a tension in the scale, I have a buoyant force, and I've got a force of gravity. Here I've just got a force of gravity. So since I know the force of gravity here, it's the same as here, the tension I know is here, I can figure out my buoyant force. So if I can figure out my buoyant force, that's going to help me out here. So my force buoyant is going to be the density of water times the volume of the object times gravity. The other thing I know about the buoyant force is that my force of buoyant plus my force of tension must equal my force of gravity. So in this case, my buoyant force that I'm looking for plus my force of tension here is 261 must equal my force of gravity of 297. So that way I know what my buoyant force is. If I know my buoyant force and I know my density of water, so now I'll take this and plug it in up here. So I'll have that number equals 1,000 times the volume of the object, which I'm looking for, times my gravity of 9.8, probably 9.8, 9.81. Okay? So using these, you can now solve for the volume of the object. That's getting me part of the way there. So the density of the object is the mass divided by the volume. I'm looking for the density of the object. So now to figure out the mass of the object, well, that's easy because this is 297, and so that's the force of gravity equals the mass times the acceleration of gravity. So to get the mass, I know that my mass is going to be my weight divided by g, or it's going to be the force of gravity divided by g, or it's going to be 297 divided by 9.8, and that's going to give me the mass of the object. So now to get my density, it's going to be my mass divided by my volume. There's my mass, there's my volume. Now I can get the density of the object. So I'm good there. Find the density of the oil. So now I've got, again, the same free body diagram. So I know that my force of tension plus my force buoyant is going to equal my force of gravity. So I've got the same gravity down, but now I've got a new tension and a new buoyant force. So I've got 274 plus my buoyant force is going to equal my force of gravity, which is going to still be 297. Now, now I've got my buoyant force, and what that is the density of oil times the volume of the object times gravity. I figured out my volume of the object over here. I know my buoyant force from here. I know my density of the oil is what I'm looking for, and I know gravity. So since I have gravity and the volume and the buoyant force, I can figure out the density of the oil.